Hey, what's up guys? This is Rob, of course, and you are also, of course, on Rule of Two Review, where today is pretty exciting because I'm finally going to get back to answering some of your guys' questions. I'm really excited to be able to do this, really thrilled. If you remember a couple of days ago, I had put out kind of a message in a short video sort of requesting questions from you guys, anything you might be curious to hear me talk about specifically, anything you just wanted to hear my opinions on, my personal tastes on, topics for videos. I, of course, wasn't sure what the response was going to be at the time, and you guys came out in force. I got a lot of questions. I got a couple of questions that are multi-part ones too, so I really have a lot to talk about and a lot of questions and stuff to get to today. I want to get to everyone's questions, so I'm going to try not to make it too long as far as how much time I spend on each individual question. Some people have longer response questions than others. And as I said, also, some people also have some questions that are kind of more than one question in one. And I don't really want to leave anyone in the dust. I was really surprised. I got responses, comments on that video, some personal messages on YouTube, some Facebook responses as well. So I was really appreciative. It was definitely kind of a larger response than I expected. I was only looking for 5 to 10 questions maybe that I would be willing to make another video on. And I got, a good amount more than that. So really feels good. I appreciate you guys being interested. I thought it would be fun. Rule of Two Review is closing in on 700 subscribers, which feels fantastic. I would wager in the next maybe 2 to 3 months I might actually hit 1,000, probably around my 1-year anniversary, which is the very end of October. I'm hoping to be able to have hit 1,000 by that point. If I do that, I'm going to have a really cool, huge contest to be able to offer for you guys, kind of as another reward. But this is both a reward for you guys, being able to answer your questions and give you guys shout-outs, as well as a reward for me to see the kind of support and see you guys come out of the woodwork and say, hey, we want to hear your thoughts on this and your thoughts on that. It's almost entirely gaming related. There's 1 or 2 things that are movie related and other stuff, kind of fun things as well. So really exciting. I'm going to cut the crap. I'm going to get right to it. I'm here to share a nice tasty cerveza with you as I kind of just kick back and respond to some of your guys' questions. So let's get to the first one. Okay, so as I get started on the questions, you guys should know, I have to give this one preface before I get started. I'm going to give first priority to my personal friends, the people who I know in real life, people who've been my friends for a long time, people who I chat with online, people who are just Rob's actual friends. So because they're my personal real life buddies, I want to give them priority. There's only 3 questions to go over. One of them is, actually, sorry, 2 of them are actually multi-part. But I'm going to really quickly just go over those questions because you guys are my buddies and my bros and my homies, and I think it's really cool that you guys got involved and asked me some questions for my YouTube stuff, so I'm going to go ahead and get to you guys first. First on that list is my good friend, the man, Brett. What's up, Brett? You sly devil, getting in on one of the first questions, which is pretty cool. Brett shares a passion for music like I do. I'm a professional musician. Brett is also a musician, writes some amazing stuff that's available on SoundCloud. He's a really good guy, and we've talked about collaborating on some projects before. So I think it's really cool and appropriate that he asked me a video game music-related question. He asked me a 2-parter. He basically wants to know my favorite gaming soundtrack, A, of all time, and B, of the last 5 years. So I'm going to answer those backwards. I'm going to say for the last 5 years, it's kind of a tie. And it's funny because both of these games are from last year. And I have a really good memory, so this isn't me just thinking of the most recent thing and not being able to think way far back. And you'll see that when you actually hear what my favorite all-time is. But these 2 are so good, and they were both from last year, so it's kind of a funny coincidence. And it's a tie for The Wonderful 101 and The Last of Us, and for completely different reasons. The Wonderful 101 is probably my favorite actual soundtrack because of the songs that were actually chosen and the way they're meant to kind of emulate this over-the-top Japanese superhero Saturday morning cartoon kind of feel in a cheesy, campy way on purpose. I mean, and there are some epic moments where the music was bringing my nerd senses to a boil because not only was the game so good and the action was getting so hectic, but at the same time, I was hearing that music and it was just perfect for what was happening. Absolutely wonderful. I would blast that soundtrack if I actually had it, and I'm sure there's a way to find it online. I don't usually go out of my way to do that stuff, but it's amazing. Go out of your way. If you've played the game, you know what I'm talking about. The Wonderful 101 is probably one of the most memorable soundtracks I have ever heard, and from day one, I was telling people that game is great for the gameplay, and it's great for the soundtrack. I have been saying that since it first came out. The Last of Us is just obvious because that movie, see what a funny kind of Freudian slip I had there. That game has such a movie-like feel. It's so cinematic, and it's also so ambient in its setting that the music needed to reflect that same feel, and it does that in spades and then some. It is all those little soft harmonious melodies with the acoustic guitar that really make you feel disparate, like the world is ending. If you feel lonely, like you are really playing as only two people traveling this lonely, desolate world. And that music felt perfect for that. If The Last of Us was only ever a movie, maybe came out as a movie and not ever as a game, I feel like it would have had a soundtrack just like that. So the fact that it did release as a game, and as this amazing cinematically presented game, it's perfect that the music was just what it was for that experience. So those two are probably easily my favorite soundtracks of the last 5 years. Now when it comes to all time, it's an easy answer for anyone who knows me. It's Metroid Prime. Mostly because Metroid Prime is my favorite game of all time, but that is aided by the fact that the soundtrack is so fantastic and memorable. It's very bombastic at points, it's very quiet and eerie and moody at points when it calls for it, because that game is all about solitude. All of the Metroid games, with the exception of Other M, have been all about the solitude of being Samus, alone, on a ship, on a planet, doing what you gotta do, you know, facing these impossible odds and just being the all-around bounty hunting badass that she is. And the music in that game is probably my favorite part, is the fact that it's taking like the classic tried and true Metroid melodies and it updated them for that 2002 Metroid Prime game. And it added this kind of techno feel to it and this, you know, very electronic new age kind of feel to the music, as well as all the other orchestral stuff that really just added to like the gloomy parts, the rainy sections of Talon 4, all these other things. It just, as if that game wasn't already my most memorable and favorite game of all time, you add to that amazing soundtrack, and that's one of the factors that helped solidify that game as my favorite game of all time. So that's pretty much it. Of the last 5 years, it's The Wonderful 101 and The Last of Us, a tie there. And favorite of all time, easily it's Metroid Prime. All right, moving on to another one of my good friends. I have a Facebook question from one Mr. Evan Swafford. Evan is a good buddy of mine who's also a really good friend of my younger brother's. Evan, part of the Free For All podcast and the freeforgeeks.com website, so definitely check that stuff out. And he asked me, he has a 3-part question. So I'm going to try to move fast through it so as to not take up too much time for everyone else's question. But Evan, you rock, man. I super appreciate you asking a question for me to touch out on a video. Pretty cool, and I really love the questions you asked too, although I have to give you a little bit of shit for one of them. First question, this one took me a while to figure out. Favorite Sega Genesis game? So super kudos, Evan, for going way back to the 90s and 16-bit gaming generation, my favorite generation of all time, I would say. So hell yes, I'm so glad I have a reason to answer an old question. When it comes to my favorite Sega Genesis game, there was a couple in the runnings. There was Vector Man, there was Beyond Oasis, there was another really good one that Contra Hardcore. Really some killer games. The Mickey Mouse game that I forgot to look up, actually, it's not Castle of Illusion, although that's one of them. There basically were some great Mickey Mouse games. Aladdin is so good. So there's a lot of games to pick from, but I actually kind of copped out and picked a really easy, obvious one, because it really is the best Sega Genesis game I ever played. It was Sonic the Hedgehog 2, you know? Sonic the Hedgehog, all of those Genesis games were amazing. I remain a huge Sonic the Hedgehog fan to this day, just because he reminds me of that great time in 16-bit gaming. Also because he was the mascot that was always squaring off against Mario. I think that the console war happening, you know, in the 90s between Sega and Nintendo, and specifically the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis, was the best, most pure essence of gaming and like what it meant to have like an actual fun kind of console war that I could ever remember. And it was also integral to me growing up as a kid, as a teenager, and as a young gamer in the 80s and 90s. So I love that time. Sonic was so huge and relevant to gaming at the time that I was a massive fan. All those games are pinnacle masterpieces in 2D platforming. And most people would say that Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is the best Sonic ever, and I completely agree. It is the best Sonic the Hedgehog ever. That was the first time we had Tails, so kind of a co-op experience happening in Sonic. The level design and the music was the best it's ever been, and it hasn't been as good since even. Seriously, that game is the best. Great final boss with Dr. Robotnik. It's the best Sega Genesis game I've ever played, so that's that. The other question he asks, most anticipated movies for the rest of 2014. Another great question, and I super love that you asked a movie question. Thank you for doing that, Evan. It's kind of unfortunate because it is now August. We're closing in on September. There's not a lot of time left for the rest of the year. Not a lot of indie titles that I know of to really look forward to, but there's some really obvious big choices. So I'm just going to kind of name the 3 major ones that jumped ahead. They won't be surprises, which is kind of too bad. I wish I could think of something else. Would have been nice if Grand Budapest Hotel or Snowpiercer or something might have been coming out at the end of the year. But we've already gone through Guardians of the Galaxy. We've gone through Captain America 2. We've gone through X-Men Days of Future Past, Transformers 4, so many great movies. Again, Grand Budapest has already come out. There's been a ton of great movies this year. I just saw The Turtles recently. Let me tell you guys what, that movie surprisingly kicks ass. It's not a masterpiece, but it's a good movie. If you like The Turtles and have liked any iteration, go see that movie. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. When it comes to the rest of the year, 3 obvious answers. It's going to be Mockingjay Part 1, because the Hunger Games movies are wonderful. Love Jennifer Lawrence. I'm a huge Katniss fan right now because she's the hot shit. And I thought Catching Fire was so good, and Mockingjay Part 1 is going to be absolutely fantastic. The other one is going to be Interstellar, Christopher Nolan's next film with Matthew McConaughey and Anne Hathaway, Jessica Chastain, John Lithgow, I think, is in it. Oh my God, that movie looks amazing. That is going to be the serious business. Christopher Nolan is a phenomenal filmmaker, a true visionary, very prolific in how he presents his very wacky out there ideas. And now he's going to space in the future? Fuck yeah, I am so on board for that. These trailers look amazing. That movie is going to get nominated for Best Picture, mark my words. I don't think it's going to have a chance to win, but it's going to get nominated. And this could finally be maybe a cinematography award for one of his films. That would be really nice to see that happen. So it looks like a beautifully shot, fantastically acted movie. Can't wait for Interstellar. And the movie I'm most looking forward to the end of the year, which is very likely going to be my favorite movie of the year if it lives up, is easily The Hobbit, The Battle of Five Armies. A little bit controversial because, as it tends to be with these things, as we've seen like with the Star Wars prequels and the Matrix sequels, Pirate sequels, people don't really like the new thing when it comes to these kinds of things. So The Hobbit has been mostly well received, but there are some detractors and people who think it's not so good. I say, fuck it. I love The Hobbit. I love all of the Middle-earth realm. All of these 2 trilogies have been fantastic. The Hobbit in no way touches the masterful perfection of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but it's a great second trilogy within the Middle-earth saga that we've seen on screen. Peter Jackson is such a great freaking guy. I just love that guy. He does such a good job with these movies. I've loved the first 2 Hobbits. Desolation of Smaug was one of my favorite movies in a very long time. And the trailer that features Pippin's song that's playing right now for, it's a teaser actually, for the Battle of Five Armies, brings chills to my brain and tears to my eyes. It looks so good. Can't wait to see what they do there. I've had, like I said, no problems with the Hobbit trilogy so far. Very, very excited. As it stands right now, I do have a favorite movie of the year, and I want to say that's going to remain the favorite movie. I'm not going to tell you what that is right now. But like I said, if there's any movie that has a good chance of becoming my favorite movie of the year, just like it has been the last 2 years, it's going to be The Hobbit. And when it also comes to the third question that Evan asks, most wanted unannounced video game titles for 2015. And he asks for a Nintendo and a non-Nintendo list because he knows me. Dude, come on, man. Okay, I know I'm the huge Nintendo fan, and yes, I prefer their stuff to the other guys, but I've always been equal opportunity when it comes to gaming, the gaming consoles, and the manufacturers. I support Sony and Microsoft. You know that I do. And I even recently made a top 10 list upcoming for the rest of the year 2014. And I think 3 or 4 of those maybe were Wii U games, but more than half of that list were not Nintendo games. So I know that just because I'm a Nintendo fan, Evan, you want me to do some Nintendo games and then some non-Nintendo games, but why do that? Shouldn't they all kind of be together? I don't really understand why we would kind of separate those. So yeah, my most wanted unannounced video game titles for 2015. That's so specific because I'm only just now actually noticing that you said unannounced. And I don't know if you actually meant that. If you did mean that, I don't really know how to take that. I know what I want as far as announced titles. Obviously, The Legend of Zelda is way up there because it's The Legend of Zelda. I don't know that I believe that game is going to stick to 2015, but it's probably my number 1. Xenoblade Chronicles X, yes, 2 Wii U games, I know. Uncharted 4, obviously. Halo 5, obviously. These are games for 2015 that I want. No Man's Sky, Batman Arkham Knight. Or no, not Call of Duty. Call of Duty's this year. What am I talking about? Forget that I said that. So, yeah, that's that. When it comes to unannounced, just to kind of play around with this idea a little bit in case you did actually mean that, and I don't really know how you meant that question, I actually did make a list before E3 of games that I wanted announced at E3, and 1 or 2 that jumped to my mind, honestly probably the number 1 that really jumps to my mind because we have yet to get it, is Beyond Good and Evil 2. So I would love to get an announcement of Beyond Good and Evil 2 and have that actually come out in 2015. I think that would be fantastic. They've basically confirmed that game is supposed to still exist, so I would love it if we actually finally get the 100% confirmation. I made a Beyond Good and Evil 2 video a couple months ago, and it's one of my most popular videos. People really got into that. And I love that because it shows that there's interest in that game. So I would definitely say, oh, Star Fox is the other big one. I really, really hope that Star Fox sticks to 2015. I also don't think that's going to be the case, but we'll see, because it's supposed to be pretty early on in development, based on what we heard about the demo that was available at E3 that people got to see behind closed doors. So yeah, I feel like when it comes to those titles, it's kind of weird the way I included those titles, but those are titles I'm looking forward to in 2015, if that helps. So I'm going to wrap that one up. Really good questions, Evan. I appreciate the 16-bit question, and I super appreciate the movie question. So good on you, buddy, and I'll hopefully be seeing you pretty soon. Okay, so on to my next question from my good friend, the last of my personal friends. My good, awesome buddy Jeff, one of my favorite people in the world. Dude, I love your ridiculous questions, you bastard. Thank you for asking these hilarious things. So he needs to know he needs to get to the bottom of some very important issues here. He asks, how do I grow my beard? Well, that's really pretty simple, honestly. It's probably just a healthy dose of male masculine Y chromosome, probably, I'd say. Kind of shaved my beard down a little bit recently, but yeah, that's where it comes from, just being as manly as can possibly be, lumberjack style. He also asks, what type of shampoo do I use? We're really getting to the bottom of important things. So it's going to be this right here, if you can see. Yes, you can consider this a plug if you want. Some Axe, because, you know, I know you're not touching my mannequin. So that's that. And he really needs to know, how does he get rid of that rash? And that's going to be a personal topic that we can talk about in another video, buddy. All right, getting back to business now. I'm getting back to your guys' questions. Thanks for putting up with some answers from some of my really good personal friends. And now I'm going to get to you guys, the viewers and the fans of Rule of Two Review. And I'm going to start off with YouTube user Chronoflation asks a pretty good question. He's been around for a while on Rule of Two Review, so thank you, buddy. I appreciate your question. And he basically asks, he has kind of a long thing. I'll read it to you guys. He says, well, I've always been more of a handheld gamer. So what would you say is your favorite third-party Game Boy lineage game? Speaking specifically about the Game Boy Color, and the Game Boy Advance. He says he should include the entire set because he feels that the Game Boy Advance gets overlooked quite a bit. I don't know that I really agree with that, but whatever. He feels like it's an underappreciated system, and he wanted me to pick one from each. I wasn't prepared for that. I actually only have one overall from all the Game Boy lineage, because it'd be really hard for me to go back to Game Boy and Game Boy Color. So I'm going to just do one overall, buddy. Sorry about that. But it's a good one, trust me. And again, he very specifically stated third party, so Chronoflation, I'm going to have to say that it is Castlevania Dawn of Sorrow for the Game Boy Advance. That, of course, is Capcom because it's a Castlevania game. And love the Castlevania series, been playing it ever since the NES days and the original. I'm one of the few people who still stands by and loves Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest. Screw everyone on the internet who could talk shit about that game, because I really like Simon's Quest. It scared the piss out of me whenever it went to night. Oh my gosh. And then, of course, slowly over time, after Symphony of Night, we know that they adopted the Metroidvania-style stuff, and Dawn of Sorrow, the first Game Boy Advance Castlevania game, is easily the best. What an amazing game, a really fantastic story. It started off this whole lineage of either 3 or 4 Game Boy Advance Castlevania games, all done in that same style with that 2D side-scrolling, awesome map setups, really deep games, great stories involving Dracula. Soma, I think, was the character introduced in that one. He was a fantastic protagonist. I hope I remember that his name was Soma. Sounds right to me. I didn't do my research. It's been now, you know, 12, well, probably not 12, 10 years maybe since I played that game, whenever it actually came out. 2004 maybe, so I guess a decade. So yeah, it's been a while, but man, that was a great game. Anyone who hasn't played those old school 2D Castlevania games, you got to get off your ass and do it. Those games are so damn good. And the Game Boy Advance games are some of the best in the series ever. And so when it comes to Game Boy, the Game Boy lineage, I mean, there's other great games that I've played. Man, there's just so many to go through. I didn't even notice that was part of the question, that you wanted one from each. So I kind of was just prepared with the one that is still my favorite of all Game Boy games, not first party, and it's definitely going to be Castlevania Dawn of Sorrow. So great question, man. Thanks. All right, on to the next question. YouTube user Michael Kelly asks a really good question. And Michael, I got to give you a very specific shout out because I think you've been one of the first people to get involved with Rule of Two way back when I first started it, now almost a year ago. You've been around on comments and on the Facebook page for a bit, so I super appreciate it, man. You're one of the OG crew, so I really appreciate it. We've had quite a few conversations back and forth. He asked me a pretty cool question. He asks, what has been my favorite gaming systems from the 80s up until now? Taking note of the fact that I've mentioned on quite a few videos that I've been gaming since the early 80s and the Atari 2600 all the way to today. So I think I'm going to narrow it down to 4 systems, and that's considering I've played basically all of them. So I'm going to go from oldest to newest. Obviously the NES, that was the game changer. That was the system that saved the video game crash that happened in '83 when I was only 3 years old at the time and didn't know what the hell was going on with video games. I remember the NES being brought home by my older brother, and the first time I saw The Legend of Zelda and Super Mario Brothers, when that was brand new, to 85, 87 or something like that. I always hear conflicting reports on if it was 85 or 87. I feel like I was 5 years old, so I want to say 85. But regardless, when the NES was brand new, saw that, changed my life, and that is what made me a gamer. So the NES gets the most props because, like most gamers, I became a gamer and got into the industry and the hobby because of the Nintendo Entertainment System in the 80s. So obviously the NES. You would think I would say Super Nintendo, which is arguably one of the best systems of all time, but I didn't spend as much time with it in the 16-bit era. I spent more time with the Genesis, because that's what we actually had at home. We even got a Sega CD for that sucker, so I spent so much time with the Genesis, and because I have such a deep-seated love for the 16-bit generation, I gotta go with the Genesis. First time I understood what it meant to go from one generation to another one, to see a graphical leap from what one system could do to brand new hardware and what that actually meant. So the 16-bit generation was so important to me, you know, kind of taking that next step into my dedication to the hobby of gaming. And since the Genesis is what I spent the most time with, obviously it has to be the Genesis, even over the wonderful Super Nintendo. Going back to Nintendo, the Nintendo 64 for sure, because it has some of the best games ever created in the history of all video games. When you look at Mario 64, Ocarina of Time, Banjo-Kazooie, Killer Instinct, so many other games, Jet Force Gemini, GoldenEye, Mario Kart 64, Jesus Christ, I could keep going. So many great games. So honestly, solely because of its library, Star Fox 64, solely because of its library and the fact that that was the Rare Nintendo golden age of gaming, and Rare the company, and Nintendo when Rare made all those wonderful games like Perfect Dark and stuff for the 64. Great age in gaming. Nintendo 64 has one of the strongest and most memorable lineups of any console ever. And then, still sticking with Nintendo, I'm going to give it up to the GameCube, because I have another very special kind of attachment to that generation. I think it's the 6th generation, so GameCube, PS2, Xbox era. And the GameCube was my go-to system, man. Another system with so many memorable games. Resident Evil 4, The Wind Waker, which is my favorite Zelda of all time. Beyond Good and Evil, that's where I played that game. There was another one that brain farting. F-Zero GX was great. This game, Soul Calibur 2, feature length, you know, that happened on that one. And many other games. Pikmin started on that platform. There was so much good shit happening. Mario Sunshine with the GameCube, and it's just it was just another step in how I became more dedicated to gaming, because I was also like working for GameStop and managing a store at the time when GameStop was an awesome place to work for. Met a bunch of my good friends and girlfriend and stuff through there. I had a really, really great experience with that whole generation, and part of that was being dedicated and appreciating the GameCube. It's also Twilight Princess was revealed. I also went to E3 during that generation, and that was when the GameCube was Nintendo's current system, and I got involved. Metroid Prime! How can I not bring up Metroid Prime? That is a system that Metroid Prime was released on. The first 2 Metroid Prime games. So I got to go to E3 when the GameCube was a relevant system and see Metroid Prime 2 in action for the first time. You know, I got to see Resident Evil 4 in action, Star Fox Assault, all these cool things, man. And so the GameCube. I would say those 4 systems are what stand out to me the most, Michael. The NES, the Sega Genesis, the Nintendo 64, and the Nintendo GameCube. Awesome, awesome systems. Been a really good time in gaming when you look at all these great systems the last 25, 30 years. So, yeah, from the 80s up until now, those would be my 4 favorite systems. Okay, next question comes from YouTube user The Waslin. I'm not quite sure how you pronounce it. I'm, of course, going to post the questions and stuff below, so you should be able to see his name printed down here. It's The Waslin. I'm going to say The Waslin. He asked, what is my all-time favorite game and console? And this is honestly pretty easy because of what I was just talking about. I've already mentioned my all-time favorite game, Metroid Prime, on the GameCube. Of course, the Trilogy Collection came out on the Wii, which was really, really awesome, but it was still that first GameCube release that changed my life, and I realized is the most memorable experience in gaming I've ever had to this day. I will say that The Last of Us became really, really close. When I first played through The Last of Us, I was so brought into that world and just mesmerized by the story and the acting and the gunplay and everything about it. It was so good. It was almost the most memorable experience, but it still can't beat the incomparable Metroid Prime. That's just my favorite game ever. Favorite game console. So I just listed 4. And I would say of those 4, if I had to pick a favorite, I think I might go Nintendo 64. Just because it was in between the fantastic beginnings of my gaming career as an 8 and 16-bit generation gamer and the more current-gen stuff with the 6th, 7th, and 8th gen that we're in now. It was kind of that midpoint, really. And because, like I said, that library is so fantastic and memorable, and it was the first time we saw 3D for all of these great things that we loved, like Mario and Zelda and stuff, and you know, with like games like Wave Race and Banjo-Kazooie and stuff that came out. First person got better with games like Perfect Dark and GoldenEye. I would have to say that it was probably my favorite system overall is the Nintendo 64. So great question. Thanks, the Waslagen. Like I said, I'm going to stick with Waslagen. Okay, so we're going to go back to Facebook for another Facebook question. I have one from Mr. Francisco Hernandez. What is up, buddy? I appreciate you writing in with a question on Facebook. He asks me, what do I think about Platinum Games? Well, obviously, I love Platinum Games. So I feel like I've played almost all of their games the last several years. The only one I know I haven't really played is Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, and I did try the demo on PS3, and I definitely saw what they were going for, and I liked what I played, but it was just not a game I ended up being able to kind of get at the time, and I do mean to go back and play it, mostly to support Platinum Games because I love those guys. But everything else they've done, Mad World, Vanquish, Bayonetta, the one and only Wonderful 101, which has become one of my probably 10 favorite games of all time. They're a fantastic studio. They make this, they just have such a vision. They kind of remind me of the video game equivalent to the Wachowskis. And hear me out when I say that, because the Wachowskis, I think what they do is, as filmmakers, they create this, they have in their head this perfect vision of what is supposed to be on screen and how to tell their story, both visually and emotionally. And I think that they knock it out of the park with every effort they've ever done. And I think that part of what they do to achieve that is taking this crazy off-the-wall vision that people would probably normally never go near, and they dedicate to it 100%. They don't shy away from whatever kookiness it is they're trying to get on screen. And because of that, it feels genuine. They feel dedicated, passionate about what they're trying to put on screen for you, and that's why their movies work, no matter how crazy they are. And when it comes to Platinum, they're kind of the same way, because they put such insane ideas into their video games, over-the-top action, balls-to-the-wall chaos, and you still love it. And it's still great to play, and it's still great to look at, and it's still fun, and it's still challenging. I cannot wait for Bayonetta 2. That is just so high on my list right now of games. I'm going to be talking about that later. Platinum Games is probably, I would have to say, one of my, I don't know, top 3 or 4 studios, period, in gaming right now. And that's even including Nintendo as their own studio that actually not only publishes games, but also develops them. So yeah, Platinum Games, top tier, AAA developer in my opinion. I'm very excited for Scalebound also, which I believe is Xbox One exclusive. So that is a game that would, let me put it this way, I love Platinum Games so much that because they're making a game that is exclusive to the Xbox One, I'll make sure to have an Xbox One by the time that game comes out. Just like if I didn't have a Wii U, I'd make sure to have a Wii U by the time Bayonetta 2 came out. So Platinum Games, they are just the best. Thanks for asking about them. I love them. I would love it if Nintendo purchased them or got into an exclusive deal with them. And I think we may still yet see that at some point. But obviously we need to wait to see what happens once Scalebound is finished and completed, since that is exclusive to another system. But overall, Platinum Games, one of the very best developers in the biz. So thanks to your question, Francisco. Okay, so moving on to the next question here. We have I have 3 different questions from YouTube user Mario Garth. Someone else who's been kind of playing around on Rule of 2 Review on the Facebook page and the videos for a while. So thanks again, dude. It's good to be able to actually talk to you here and answer some of your questions. I appreciate your dedication and your vocalizing your opinions and stuff on a lot of the videos for a long time now, so that's really cool. And so since you have 3 separately posted questions, I'm going to answer them separate and kind of intersperse them with some other ones. I'm going to touch on the first one Mario Garth asks me, which is my most anticipated game for 2015. I feel like if we were to go for confirmed games for 2015, or ones that I feel like are actually going to come out in 2015, it's going to be a tie between Xenoblade Chronicles X and Halo 5 Guardians. Because I do believe that both of those games will stick to their 2015 release date. I am such a massive Halo fan, as I talked about. I am such a massive Xenoblade fan. Xenoblade Chronicles is one of the best games in a very, very long time. Halo has always been amazing, and they stepped it up big time with Halo 4, so I'm so in love with what 343 is doing with the Halo series that I just cannot wait to see what they are going to do with the first next-gen Xbox One Halo game, Halo 5. At first, I loved the idea of them having the subtitle Guardians, and I've kind of since let that go. I don't necessarily feel that I care for the subtitle. I'm sure it's like appropriate and applies to something happening in the game, but it's just not how I picture my Halo games. I like them, just keep it simple and number them. That works for Halo. We're used to that. It's cool, but hey, I mean, regardless, they could call it Shit Poop on a Stick Fuck, and I'd be like, well, can't wait for Shit Poop on a Stick Fuck Part 5 because that looks awesome. So, doesn't really matter what they call it. The game's going to be great. Xenoblade is, oh my god, please you guys, go out and play Xenoblade Chronicles on the Wii if you have not. It's a very hard game to find right now, and if you do find it, I know it's very expensive. Very, very proud that I reserved and purchased that game day one, launch day in the US. So I got that game for $50 right away, brand new condition. I will never get rid of it. I will never part with it. Xenoblade Chronicles X looks so fantastic. It looks, excuse me, it looks gorgeous. And what Nintendo showed during the Treehouse for a lot of the gameplay stuff over E3 was wonderful. They're really building on this really fantastic, simple yet deceptively complex battle system. And just the worlds and the environments and the traversal, they're adding mechs and vehicles and basically Transformers. My god, it looks so good. So it's probably those two games as far as what's confirmed. Now, as far as things that I don't really know or think will stay 2015, it's also a tie. And it's going to be two other very high-profile games, The Legend of Zelda and Uncharted 4. I think those are both going to be potentially two of the best games we've ever played. Uncharted is one of my favorite games of the last generation, where the PlayStation 3 actually was my favorite system last gen. But of course, The Legend of Zelda is my second favorite gaming franchise of all time behind Metroid. So, and what they showed at E3 was so good. Like, just so good. So Uncharted 4's showing at E3, I didn't think was really like awesome. Other than the fact it was just nice to see it. It was nice to hear Nathan Drake's voice again and Nolan North. And it was nice to get a title and be confirmed that it is actually Uncharted Part 4. It was nice to get that stuff. But what they showed wasn't really like a great trailer, and I didn't really care about it, other than, like I said, it's like, oh, well, we know it's Uncharted and it's coming, great, hooray. I think the game's going to be amazing, so that's why it is still so high and why it's able to tie itself with The Legend of Zelda. But what they actually showed for Legend of Zelda far exceeded, I think, my expectations and most people's. And I love what they're doing with the art style. I love that it seems like there's a pseudo-futuristic thing going on. I love that there's a lot of mystery we still have, yet they still showed us in-game, in-engine gameplay stuff that was just so gorgeous. And I love the fact that we don't know what's going on with that character. Was it Link or was it not? Was it male? Was it female? And Anuma said some kind of cryptic things to sort of lead us in one way or another, but I don't really believe all of it. So I think it's possible that that could be Link. It could not be Link. It could be male. It could be female. Could be Link. Could be Zelda. Could be a new person. Could be a Link who you're able to play as a girl as you want. I mean, it could be any of these things. There's so much going on there. So it's really exciting to wonder. I think Nintendo's going to knock it out of the park with the next Zelda. I hope it makes awesome use of the gamepad because I love what the Wind Waker did just playing around with it. And I think that the gamepad can be awesome for a Zelda experience when the game is built from the ground up for that platform. So I'd have to say for 2015, that's my most anticipated games, both rumored and both expected to actually launch in 2015. So yeah, great question, Mario Garth, and I'll be coming back to you in a minute. Okay, so next question comes from Devil Soma. Devil Soma first says, didn't know that you were really hot. So, Devil Soma, you cheeky monkey, are you hitting on me? I think so. Devil Soma then goes on to say, anyway, what do you think about the Pokemon series? And I would love if you make a video about Platinum Games titles, and what do you think about them? So, I kind of just touched on Platinum Games, obviously. I can look into making another full-fledged video about them, talking more in depth later. And since I love Platinum Games, I obviously would love to talk about that topic. What do I think about the Pokemon series? It's a good question because I'm a diehard Nintendo fan. I would assume it's part of the reason you asked me, and then also because you're also, I'm assuming, a Pokemon fan yourself. So, as a diehard Nintendo fan, you would think I'd be a huge Pokemaniac, I meant to say. You would think I'd be a huge Pokemaniac, and I'm really not. I actually never really got into Pokemon too much. As far as its, like, first influx into the States when it started as like the cartoon TV show and everyone got into it as kids, I was a little too old. It was like a little behind my time. A lot of my really good buddies who are a couple of years younger than me, they grew up big Pokemon fans, and a lot of my friends are still big Pokemon fans. And I know that even a lot of adults are still too, but at the time that I think a lot of people were getting into Pokemon, it wasn't too long before I started getting into Dragon Ball Z. So when it comes to that kind of anime American sort of TV experience, this shit right here, Dragon Ball Z, that's what had my attention and still has my attention. But that's not a reason to not like Pokemon. It just sort of kept me so away from it that by the time I really was understanding what was going on with Pokemon, it was just too late. So I never really got too into it. I've spent a very little time with some of the old school Game Boy games, and I know that they're great RPGs, and even to this day, the ones on the DS and the 3DS sell huge, they review like crazy, everyone loves them. So I know that they make really, really good games. But they don't really appeal to me or speak to me, and I feel like it's too late to try to get invested in the Pokemon world and all the different Pokemon and the names and the evolutions and the human characters and the RPG elements and how do I do this and what about the previous games I never played. It's like a very intimidating undertaking to consider getting into them now, as well as an expensive undertaking to get into now. That being said, what I will say about Pokemon is I definitely know that there is a huge appeal for Pokemon and a huge audience for Pokemon. So when thinking about Nintendo, my favorite company, and the success that I want them to see after the kind of rough start of that first year of the Wii U, I definitely can say, Nintendo, what the fuck are you doing? Make an RPG console HD next-gen Wii U fucking Pokemon game. Do that. You want like 100 quadrillion trillion dollars? Make a Pokemon game. Even I know this, that I'm not a Pokemon fan. You need to do that. So when I think about Pokemon, I think not for me, but Nintendo needs to keep doing it because it makes them money. It's very successful, and people love it. They're obviously good games. I think that's probably more important than just wanting Nintendo to make money. They're good games that people who like Pokemon love to play. And the same way that people who like Call of Duty love to play those games, which would be me, I know that they're not really that different from game to game, but they're just what I like, so I will play them. So people who like Pokemon games, right on, game on. You should keep playing them, and Nintendo should keep making them. And again, make that Wii U fucking RPG game and make a bunch of money. Okay, guys, getting down to the end here. Only a couple more questions to go. I may leave some out and save some for another video in the future because I don't want this video to be too terribly long, but there's a couple other good ones that I want to answer. So we're going to go back to Mario Garth, and he asks, do I own any handheld consoles? Well, yes, as a matter of fact, I do. I have about 3 Game Boy Advances in a box. I think I have one that's the original style without the backlight. And I think I have 2 SPs, if I remember right. They're actually in a GameCube box, as funny as that is. So I have some Game Boy Advances still and a couple games if I ever wanted to bust those out. It's been a while, but it's a great system. I, of course, have a 3DS. The first 3DS I had was the first Zelda one they made for when Ocarina of Time came out, which was the smaller, regular-sized 3DS. And then when the 3DS, the Zelda-themed 3DS came out for A Link Between Worlds last year, I traded my old Zelda 3DS in for the Zelda-themed 3DS XL for A Link Between Worlds, the one that has the Triforce on the top and bottom for High Rule and for Low Rule. So I love the 3DS. I love the DS. I would love to have a PlayStation Vita, and someday maybe, but there's rumors that it's going to go away, and I wouldn't be surprised if it did. So I don't want to plunk down all that cash on something that's either A, going to go away, or B, become a very expensive controller relegated just for the PlayStation 4. Not interested in that, which is too bad, because I know it's a pretty quality machine. Also, I own one other pretty cool thing. Oh, it's a Virtual Boy. Oh my god, this is one of my prized possessions. That's something that I actually got way back in the day when I worked at GameStop and someone brought in a Virtual Boy and a couple games to try to trade in. And I was like, sorry dude, we don't take Virtual Boys, but I sure as hell want that. How much do you want for it? And I think he charged me like 40 or 50 bucks. It's hard to remember. This would have been like, I don't know, 2004, 2005, a long, long time ago. And so regardless, he charged me some money. I gave him some cash and he sold me that Virtual Boy. So having a Virtual Boy is pretty cool. It's probably my favorite video game collectible system that I have. I also own an Atari Jaguar, which is something else I'm pretty proud to have, which is another very rare thing. But at the end of the day, the one failed Nintendo machine that is the craziest anomaly in video game history, I have to say that I'm most proud to have a Virtual Boy. So I've only got a couple games, and after a while, one of the like you look into it, you know, it's got a thing where you put 2 eyes like right up like this, and each one has like a video screen in it, right? But since like one of them stopped working basically after a while, so it's now you're just looking at like 1 eye's worth of screen of gameplay, and it's the 2 of them together that created the 3D effect. So I feel like I basically have the world's only 2D Virtual Boy. So as if it wasn't a Virtual Boy and kind of a piece of crap in and of itself, it's not even 3D. So one day I may try to find a way to get it fixed, but I've never wanted to open it up myself, and I'll take a look at it. But yeah, so as far as handheld, as far as handheld systems, that's what I have. I have a Virtual Boy I can't play, I have a Game Boy Advance that's in a box somewhere, and I have a 3DS that I love to death. Alrighty, just a couple more questions here, guys, and I'm going to run through these fast. Not to not give anyone fair time with their questions, but I just don't want to make this video too super long, like I said. We're going to go to another Facebook question from Darian Setiawan? I don't know. Setiawan? So Darian asks, what are your top 5 Nintendo characters you would like to see in Smash Brothers? So I actually made a video about my top 5 most anticipated Smash Brothers characters earlier in the year, so it's very cryptic you asked that. Some of the characters that I spoke about in that video have already been kind of responded to. And one of them, I think the number 4 was to have Wonder Red or any of the Wonder Team as a playable character from the Wonderful 101. And since I've made that video, we now know that there's no playable characters from Wonderful 101 because Wonder Red is actually... he's either an assist trophy or a collectible trophy, and I don't remember. You guys should definitely let me know down below. I think he might just be a collectible trophy. So because of that, we know that there's going to be no Wonder Team that's playable in the game. But I'm going to go ahead and link the video below, so you should just go ahead and check that out if you want to know my 5 most anticipated. But what I will do is give you a special treat because of the video and the fact that you asked me an awesome question on Facebook, and tell you what my number 1 is. And that is going to be Travis Touchdown, which I know sounds like a crazy surprise. I've never had a reason to talk about No More Heroes in any of the Rule of 2 review videos, but No More Heroes is one of my favorite franchises of all time, one of my favorites of the last 10 years. Travis Touchdown is an amazing character, and he's part of the reason that that series and those games are so good, even though they're super goddamn quirky. So I love the character. He's a real funny, kind of charming, charismatic idiot, and he just works well. His voice acting was really fantastically handled. I just love the character. He's exclusive to Nintendo. So even though he's not a Nintendo character like you asked, he is an exclusive to Nintendo character, even though he's a third-party character. So that was my number 1. That's still my number 1. If I could have any character in Smash Brothers that hasn't yet been announced, it would easily be Travis Touchdown. Okay, so Dval asks me my most anticipated Wii U game besides Smash Brothers. I'm going to go ahead and treat that as a 2014 only question just to make it easier since I've touched on some 2015 stuff already. And I think I'm going to have to say Bayonetta 2. Again, I've talked about Platinum Games. I love those guys. The first Bayonetta is one of my favorite games. I think it's going to be gorgeous. I think it's going to play fantastically. I love that it's this third-party secured, mature exclusive for the Wii U. I think it's generating the right hype and buzz. We've got the first game package for free with extra Nintendo content. That's going to be a great value. It's going to be a kick-ass game. And as far as 2014 goes, eliminating Smash, which is my actual most anticipated game, it's definitely going to be Bayonetta 2. Okay, here's a really cool question I'm excited to answer. Titans Freak 98 asks me, what is my favorite 3D Mario game? I actually thought long and hard about this one for a couple days. I was tempted to say the first Galaxy, and I was tempted to say Mario 64, but I went with the kind of more obscure answer with Mario Sunshine. And I think it's because it just goes back to a game that I have the right kind of memories on. Memories for, I should say. I think that the painting mechanic and the water backpack mechanic was awesome. That game was gorgeous for its time. It holds up still today. I love the worlds. It was hard as shit. It is the hardest Mario game I've ever played. Well, maybe Galaxy 2, but Sunshine and Galaxy 2 are like right there neck and neck. I definitely have to say it was at a great time for me gaming-wise. I was really excited to be getting into that new generation at the time, and Mario came out, I think 2002, just a year into the GameCube's life cycle. I just started working for GameStop, so I got to help push that game when it was brand new. I remember selling that game to a kid who brought in a bag full of frickin' pennies. $50 worth of pennies. 5,000 pennies. That's a lot of fucking pennies. So I counted that out, and I got to sell this kid as Mario Sunshine, and him and his dad were thrilled. So, you know, Mario Sunshine, it was just a great game. I know it's not the popular answer. It's kind of the most divisive of all the 3D Mario games, but I loved it, you know. Go back and play it and see how well designed those worlds are and how cool the mechanic is with the water cannon, which had a name and I can't remember it now. It's great. It's really awesome. Pretty game. Great level design. Great Mario game. Galaxy 1 is like right there. Right there, because I actually prefer Galaxy 1 to Galaxy 2. But at the end of the day, my favorite 3D Mario game, Mario Sunshine. Alrighty guys, so in the interest of time, I'm going to make this the very last question. And it is going to be, it's a great one. It's a Metroid question, which is why I had to make sure to make this the last one. So this comes from the Mudium, I think is how you pronounce that. YouTube user the Mudium or the Mudium. He asks me, which do I like more? A 2D Metroid game, a 3D Metroid game, or a 2.5 Metroid game like Metroid Other M? Wonderful question. Very, very hard to answer. You obviously have been paying attention and you know that I am a gigantic Metroid fan. As I said earlier, it's my favorite series. Samus is my favorite character. Metroid Prime is my favorite game. So me and Samus and Metroid, we get along. We're good buddies, me and them. So, gosh, what do I prefer? So, I like them all. Let me say that. And if you can't tell by the fact that I've had this Other M poster on the back of my wall for my last couple of vlog videos, I liked Other M a lot. I think that game gets a lot of shit. It gets a bad rap. I think it was a great game. Not the best Metroid game, but a fantastic game nonetheless. I've considered doing actually a playthrough for a Rule of 2 review if people are interested in that. So if you are, you should let me know and I'll go ahead and do that. So I like that 2.5D that they did for Other M, and I think that that has a really good future if they wanted to go that route with future games, especially on the Wii U. So I would love it if the next game had that kind of feel. But when you really think about Metroid, you think about 3D or 2D, and I'm going to say that even though my favorite Metroid game of all time, Metroid Prime, is a 3D game, I still have to go 2D. Because 2D is the roots of Metroid, that's where the series started. And even though my one favorite game is a 3D game, with that one exception, all the other best Metroid games are 2D games. And I grew up when the first game was brand new, and I remember playing it not knowing Samus was a girl, and I remember hearing at school, at elementary school, that, hey, that Samus guy is a girl. And there's a Justin Bailey code to see her as a girl, and it was like, what? Like, it was the craziest shit ever. And what a great, great time in gaming when you can still have that kind of a surprise. And have it mean something. And it actually changed the course of gaming. It really affected female protagonists in gaming going forward. Or at least it was the first step to that. There were other characters that did other things after that. But Samus was the first big one. And that game was just, it was just so moody and atmospheric and fun and dark and creepy. The NES game, the 1987 NES game, that's how old I am. I was playing that game. And it was awesome, you know, and then don't even get me started on Super Metroid. Oh my god, Super Metroid, let's make out a little bit. Love that fucking game. Although it's really funny because my favorite 2D Metroid game is not Super Metroid. It's actually Metroid Zero Mission, which was for the Game Boy Advance, a remake of the original Metroid with kind of newer graphics, touched up some of the maps a little bit, redid them, and also added a whole Zero Suit section at the end of the game after you initially beat it. That is the best 2D Metroid game, and it's my second favorite Metroid game of all time. So, like I said, I like all three options. Other M is a fantastic, wonderful game. If you haven't played it and you're nervous because of the controversy, don't listen to the bitchy, whiny haters. You should play that game. It's fucking awesome. Metroid Prime, a 3D Metroid, is my favorite game of all time and my favorite Metroid, but at the end of the day, Metroid still shines in 2D. It's meant to be in 2D. I want more 2D Metroid games. I hope that that's what we get next. Even though there's no wrong answer, if I had to pick, I would still go 2D. So yeah, that pretty much answers it. My favorite kind of Metroid game is definitely the 2D side-scrolling Metroid. Oh my gosh, and there you go. That's it, guys. That's going to be all the questions for today. I had a couple more that I did want to touch on, so sorry if I didn't get to your question. I just had more responses than I was anticipating, like I said at the beginning of the video, and I cannot stress to you how cool that is, how good it feels, and how much I appreciate your guys' support, your questions, your interest. Some cool topics for some videos going forward that I might be making sometime in the future. But at the end of the day, again, I want to leave one last thank you. This video was made for you guys, the fans and supporters of Rule of 2 Review. Like I said, closing in on 700 subscribers feels awesome. I didn't really ever know if I could kind of get this to get even this big, and I'm just going to keep on going. At the end of the day, I love talking about video games. I love inspiring other people to talk about video games, or movies, comics, whatever. So that's why I do Rule of 2 Review, because it's fun for me and because I enjoy it. It's a lot of work to do it, but it doesn't feel like work because I love it, you know, which sounds really cheesy like a commercial, but that's just the honest to God's truth. You guys asked some great questions, so thank you for having such interesting topics for me to talk about. Part of the reason this video is so damn long is because you asked so many good questions that I could talk about forever. And if you watch Rule of 2 Reviews videos, you know I am a long-winded son of a bitch. I talk a lot. It doesn't matter what, I could be talking about toenails, I could turn that into a 15-minute conversation. It's kind of a blessing and a curse. But again, I'm going to leave it one last time. Thank you guys to the followers, subscribers, and fans of Rule of 2 Review. Thank you to my really good friends who asked the first couple of questions. I love you guys. I'm sure I'll be seeing you sometime pretty soon here in real life, IRL. And I think that's pretty much it. So again, you guys are awesome. I appreciate the support. And I will catch you guys. I might do another question video sometime soon since I have more questions to answer. So I might do a part 2 to this. But I'm going to leave it like this for now. So again, thanks guys. You all rock my socks and you float my boat. And I'll catch you on the next video.